Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 30th audio file in the audiocast series known as the Q News Patriot. I'm the Q News Patriot. My name is SGAnon. It's so exciting to be back with you. We've been apart for a little while now. I've been trying to keep things pretty current as I can with TruthSocial, trying to ensure that everyone gets an opportunity to see the connections that are being made in real time. There's simply so much happening. It's very difficult to describe to each of you just how much is going on around the world. In the last few days, we have seen things from the Twitter files continuing to expose for the normies and sleepers ungodly levels of interagency corruption, backdoor government dealing, backdoor government and intelligence community influences in social media platforms. Anons have known for a little while that the social media operations in the United States have been essentially an extension of DARPA and the CIA programs, programs that are primarily manipulated through funding for a good long time. But for the normies, the sleepers out there to come around and see that the information exchange that they believed to be so free flowing, so free of meddling, if you will, it's waking a lot of them up. I've received more messages, contacts, things like that, quips and statements from individuals in my social sphere, individuals running the gauntlet between family, friends, acquaintances, coworkers, etc. I've seen more messages and concerns from them regarding government corruption in the last 7 days than at any point in this journey so far. With what's continuing to play out with the Twitter files, I think we can be assured of a couple of different things. One, Elon Musk, for good or for ill, is doing the bidding of the White Hat Alliance. Mr. Musk is, I believe, fulfilling his role and his part to play. Many out there have sent me variations of photographs and things like this taken at different times, statements made at different points along the way. And yes, it is possible that the individual we know as the genuine Elon Musk was removed and replaced, but I cannot corroborate that information for you at this time. What I can corroborate is the individual known as Elon Musk is the largest civilian contractor for the U.S. Department of Defense, has a great deal of understanding regarding the level of lying and depravity at play in the world, is an individual that has been deeply involved in big money, big finance, big industry, big business, big wealth for a very long time. What is currently going on with the Twitter files is, in my assessment, a counterinsurgency for your mind. This appears to have the markings of a counterintelligence operation. We saw as much of that when Elon released information tying back individuals at Twitter to both the FBI and the CIA. Immediately, digital warriors and soldiers out there unearthed that over 20 other individuals still at play, still employed by the organization known as Twitter, have intelligence community experience, exposure, or proximity that certainly brings into question what they're doing at a social media giant that regulates speech. You know, it cannot be overstated that this operation on Twitter is breaking the glass of reality for an enormous number of people. You know, patriots and anons out there that are awake, those that have come in fairly recently and those that have been here since the 2016-17 days, and even those before, have known for a long time the level of depravity that has existed the level of coordinated subversion and coordinated seditious activities that have gone on between big government, big finance, big tech, and industry, um, essentially all of our lives, and certainly for the last 150 plus years here in the United States of America. But for a great majority of the population, they are just now coming around to the fact that not only is there government corruption, not only is there financial corruption, not only are there agendas that they know nothing about, but which they are party to, but they're seeing how it is all connected. They're seeing how the corruption is not separate. These aren't pockets of a problem that we have isolated in different areas, localities, municipalities, or government arenas. This is a coordinated, well adhered enemy, and they are the enemy of the people and the enemy of humanity. The sleepers are being accelerated into their awakening phase. At the same time that we have headlines coming out both in the Daily Mail and in other publications discussing further research on COVID variants that are lethal to children, that are being bioweaponized. I cannot validate whether or not these experiments, these things that were being reported in the narrative space, are actually occurring or not. What I can validate is that the United States Military Alliance and the World Alliance of Generals around the world, are actively monitoring all, I repeat, all mass destruction or weapons of mass destruction, biological weapon capabilities, etc. And part of the reason that we are allowing some things to play out to an extent is to identify where those feeler arms go down into society. You know, any good Anon out there knows, after having done some research into COVID-19, that COVID-19, both the pandemic itself, as well as the lead up and research into the pandemic for more than 25 years, would not have been possible without the active participation of civilians in the civilian sector who were either duped, bribed, blackmailed, disappeared, paid off, etc., to make these things possible. Higher academia, Chapel Hill, Johns Hopkins, other medical colleges and universities that are well known and respected, research laboratories such as the Mayo Clinic and others, all sort of complicit in activities to destroy mankind. And so part of living through this movie is allowing some of this to play out so that we can find every single last one of them. You know, reconnaissance gets us only so far. We do the very best that we can. We have enormous, essentially incomparable capabilities for surveillance, data collection and aggregation, dissemination, etc. But sometimes we still have to rely on the actions of the enemy to tell the enemy out. So I've reported now for a couple of different times, or on a couple of different occasions, that a second series of lockdowns and mandates is possible. And it would appear that we have some narrative preparation at play for just exactly that. But whether or not that plays out is essentially anybody's guess. You know, the United States military, certainly here in the Republic, and the military alliance around the world, sort of requires no more justification to go public with these operations, bring them into the foreground, and begin mass takedowns. But to do so prematurely would sort of defeat the reason that we're here. It would disappoint our objectives. We would not be able to fully complete the mission. The mission at this point is not only to awaken others, it is also to continue the apprehension, identification, and or destruction of enemy assets and capabilities that cannot be allowed to live on into the future. There are a number of monuments that are built on the Earth's sort of energetic pathways that come through our plane. Many of those have to be either destroyed or repurposed, redesigned. We have, you know, networks that pierce all the way down into the residential and commercial civilian sectors of society all around the world that we are still sort of collating and identifying information about, handling combatants, you know, initiating operations and carrying them forth. And so I understand that a great many of you and myself included, are very tired of the walk of war. We're very tired of sort of crossing the battlefield to find yet another hill awaits us. But this is truly the nature of securing total and complete victory on any battlefield in any dimension. We use the terms fifth generation warfare, interdimensional warfare, transdimensional warfare, irregular warfare, guerrilla warfare, cyber warfare, etc. All of these terms describe a lens that can be applied to an action and a reaction. But to secure total victory in any space requires that we obliterate utterly 100% and nothing less. We obliterate 100% of the enemy capability, the enemies themselves, and the enemy infrastructure. If we are able to capture and repurpose certain elements of that infrastructure, if we're able to capture assets or use defections to our advantage, operations and stratagems change and get tailored accordingly. This is an active situation, influx and dynamic every day. It's worth noting that, as we go through this operation, we're seeing the public space sector being handled. We're seeing the financial space sector being handled, certainly attacked with FTX and the reclamation of deep state assets. That's going to come back and haunt certain exchanges such as Binance. These large money laundering channels are being taken down. Some of them being repurposed, all of the wealth being reclaimed. But we're being very surgical and very targeted in how we collapse the financial system. And it has been in free fall since about September the 11th, 12th of this year. But the bringing down of a system that literally governs every aspect of society vis-a-vis the value exchange that happens, that collapse doesn't happen in weeks. And sometimes, folks, it doesn't happen in months. How quickly we go through this is sort of tenuous. We don't want to go too fast and create uncontrollable chaos and uncontainable situations, but we don't want to go too slow either, because there is a sort of an expectation both at the top of this movement and all through the we the peoples around the world that the show can only go on for so long. So it's worth noting, we're winning on all fronts. Things are moving right along. But it does get weary, and that's okay. It's all right to take a sip from the canteen before you continue the march, but continue the march we must. Recently, I put out some information regarding Brazil. It was later proven out to be pretty accurate. The Brazilian situation is continuing to unfold. Bolsonaro has essentially declared himself the supreme leader of the Brazilian armed forces, and the armed forces have acknowledged that this is true. And so now what we are seeing in Brazil is the beginning of a targeted, coordinated, at-scale military operation to apprehend CCP assets, deep state assets. There are, from what I understand, we have intelligence assets such as Mossad and CIA that are also present within the borders of Brazil. And so we will be targeting these assets, insulating the people. There have been emergency alerts in different areas that have gone off through the country, telling people to stock up on between 15 and 30 days of important water supplies, food, medicine, things of this nature. And the Army is sort of rolling out cascading lockdowns in communities once communities have been sort of informed and brought up to speed, given a chance to do the things that they need to do to secure their persons, their life, their liberty, etc. Once those lockdown orders go into effect in different localities around the country, residents are being told to stay indoors. The Army will be under shoot to kill orders, essentially to ensure that there is no escape for the individuals that perpetrated in Brazil what has been perpetrated both in the Republic of the United States and all around the world. A number of Americans are a bit upset to see that other countries are setting the ball. They are running with the expectations of the people, and they are executing at a much more rapid pace things that we wish to see unfold here. I have to remind each of you that the Republic of the United States is a completely different animal. The United States government system, far more vast, far more influential in certain key areas, both internationally but also at home. U.S. laws make certain operations difficult to just come right out and slam into. We have to follow a particular process. We have different areas of policy and regulation that have been entirely suspended, laws that have been pre-lifted to allow the military to do certain things within the confines of the United States. And they have been leveraging that authority for the last 2 years, just over 2 years at this point, about 2.5 years, 2 years and 9 months. But just because we don't see that publicly does not mean it's not happening, and it doesn't mean that it won't come here. It simply means that we have an entirely different animal that we have to bring down. We cannot apply the same sort of hunting techniques. This alliance is operating within the sort of the scaffoldings that are erected in the legal scaffoldings that are erected in areas around the world. We're doing the very best we can to maintain complete legality in these operations simply because we are applying their own system against them. There are allocations within the system that they themselves devised, which they were going to use against us in all areas of the world, in all nations, in all areas of law and order and civil society. We have gained control of most of those areas in key nations and many of those areas in a majority of nations, and we are sort of leveraging the entire system against them to force all of them out into the open, and we're capturing the ones that are truly problematic, and the lower mid-level mules and things like that are receiving deals mostly of some sort for legacy preservation, reduced prison time, depending on what they did, in exchange for the information that gets us to all of the upper mid-level management, all of the lower level executive command of this cabal. So this is a process that requires patience, right? It's difficult for the American public to have patience because we're a very get it done now society. We are a very proud and strong society. We've always sort of held the beacon of liberty around the world. And what we are witnessing is a humbling moment for all of us as we live through this movie known as the fake Joe Biden presidency. Regarding fake presidents, fake governments, etc., operations that have been going on around the world, one thing to know is that patriots in Europe have been slowly intercepting individuals in the background in their governments. Many of them have cut deals and agreed to work with the alliance in preservation for their own legacy, and sometimes depending on their level of involvement for their skin. But we now have patriots activated in the French armed forces, Q patriots in the French armed forces that are running shadow operations in the French government, and we can expect to see massive changes coming to France politically, and those changes may affect areas of civilian life that we all are very familiar with. There's an energy crisis in Europe that is no longer a conspiracy. It is absolutely coming, and Europeans are encouraged to prepare for emergency situations at the very best level that you're capable. Doesn't mean to go out and buy everything in the store. Certainly don't be running out and doing things out of fear. That would defeat the purpose for why we are here. Our societies are being slowly ground to a halt. The United States will be one of the last ones to come to that point, but they will come to that point on this side of the Atlantic, as well as Europe is coming to that point now and is only continuing into that point. Ensuring that you are prepared for the situation, the eventuality where serious restrictions on certain areas of society that we know to be guaranteed and we take for granted most of the time is just a prudent measure to employ. We have Putin continuing the Russian special military operation in Ukraine. We have Belarus and Russia that are running joint training operations along the Ukrainian border, and it does appear that Belarus, based on recent statements from their defense ministry, is considering public involvement in the war at this point. We have backlash from Poland as a result of that, and we have Latvia urging NATO to get involved. It's my understanding that in some respects, NATO assets are already being employed and involved in this conflict. This will be one of the drivers for Russia to sort of take it to the next level. They're being very surgical in how they cripple the infrastructure in Ukraine, both to attempt to the greatest extent possible to protect civilian life within the borders of Ukraine, but also to see the mission through. And the mission is to ensure that no dangerous pathogens are able to be whisked away into the world or released into the world. Certainly that no large scale false flag mass casualty events are made possible. But we're going to see how this sort of plays out. This has been the stomping grounds of this Khazarian mafia deep state apparatus for going on 1,000 years at this point, just over 1,000 years if my memory serves. And so they've had 1,000 years to sort of entrench themselves and fortify and live their lives and leverage their control and power throughout the world. And so this is a delicate situation. It is my belief that we will have certainly the narrative of NATO involvement at some point before this conflict is over. It's also my belief that there will be actual NATO involvement coming to this conflict, and how Russia and Putin respond to such a situation is very interesting. And we have Turkey that has aligned itself militarily with Russia and with Russian backing is preparing and conducting operations right now for a ground invasion into the northern areas of Syria. The targets, again, are CIA assets, caches, storehouses, safe houses, things of this nature, terrorist networks that are sort of hiding out in the Arabic world. And Turkey's had quite enough of the Central Intelligence Agency, and they have taken steps and are taking steps to protect their own, the same that Russia is doing presently. At the same time that all of this is unfolding, we have President Xi from China signing oil deals with Saudi Arabia, being met by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, an individual who we know is part of this alliance, meeting with Xi, who is also part of this alliance, and outlining new power structures, new alignments of influence and control in this world. And we are sort of slowly dethroning the US dollar and the deep state power structure financially at every opportunity. Remember that these things take time. We have to have sort of public sentiment, if you will, involved in all levels in societies where it's crucial and accountable. China being sort of a unique exception to that rule simply because of the level of slavery they have endured in the last 60 to 80 years. But certainly in Saudi Arabia, you know, things of this nature have to take time to roll out. We have to arrive at a point where nations can seamlessly conduct the diplomacy as though it's happening in real time. And it is happening in real time. It's simply happening in a different fashion and in a different direction than it was always purposed to have happened. You know, the Q movement, what the Q movement really is about reversing this cabal. It's about undoing the things that the cabal has done, returning decision-making power to the peoples of the world so they can sort of guide themselves to the future that they envision. We all envision a future of love, security, and peace. We all envision a future of prosperity. We all envision a future of living up to our higher selves, our best selves. We all envision a future of a spiritual realization for mankind that has never occurred before and will be unlikely to occur again. You know, this is a process that is moving the whole of the earth into a new way of life, a new way of understanding, a new way of considering things in our world that we've always been sure about. And we're seeing this play out on the world stage through things like the Saudi Arabia-China deal, the alignment with China and Russia, the alignment with Russia and Turkey, and certainly the alignment with deep state assets and their minions that are left over around the world. So all of this being said, I'm going to show you all a couple of things. I think you'll be pleased to see it. The issue known as NESARA, the National Economic Security and Reformation Act, is a contentious point amongst the truth movement simply because very little exists that can corroborate with unequivocal proof the existence of this document, or of this scaffolding, if you will. I can assure you this document or documents do exist. This is a scaffolding that was built out, ready to roll out in 2001. It is the reason that September 11th, 2001 in the United States occurred. And so I want to show all of you here in just a moment a couple of proofs towards this. We're going to discuss a little bit about where we go as humanity when all of this is said and done, and then we'll conclude with a sort of a positive direction. Give me just a moment. I'm going to try and share my screen with you. So a little bit of a personal note. Over the last 4 to 5 years, I, like many others, made sort of ill-informed and inadvisable financial decisions, some of them made out of necessity when my son's mother and I initially split apart, others made out of simple ignorance. And so I've gone through a couple of debt programs at different points along the way, have paid off quite a bit, actually, several thousand in debts over the last 5 years. Still have a ways to go. And this is an excerpt from a terms of use, or a policy essentially, that has changed with one of the organizations that I make debt payments to. And so this organization, I've never been allowed to use a credit card for obvious reasons. I've always used my debit card. My debit card is a Visa card, and up until recently have never had any issues with this process. But I was sent over the last few weeks this update. I never really, I didn't want to report something ahead of time without truly investigating it and allowing it to pan out. And I can assure you, with the most recent payment that I made, which was the end of this past month, first part of this month, this is absolutely a fact now. The policy, as you can see on the screen here, has now changed where credit cards, prepaid cards, or any Visa or American Express debit cards are no longer able to be accepted. Now, this is not the first time that I've seen issues with Visa over the last 2 years or so. We've had several issues with sort of processing situations going on. We've had several issues with security as it pertains to encryption. We've had issues with cards not working, cards being shut down, debit cards suddenly inactive, things of this nature. But this is a large organization that I have. It's a transnational organization that is at some levels, it's involved with government finance also, and they're no longer able to accept payments from my Visa debit card. They're also no longer able to accept American Express debit cards, and that would mean American Express of any kind, simply because the only other option that American Express offers are credit cards. Pardon me just a moment. I'm going to share my screen in another fashion as well. I had sort of a whim after I found, or excuse me, after I decided to share that with all of you, to go on to FreeSpoke, the search engine that I use, sort of substituting for Google and DuckDuckGo and these captured operations, etc. And I decided to look up anything regarding Visa being hacked and seeing what the news cycles had reported about it. So as you can see, Visa hacked returns absolutely no results from news outlets of any kind, media outlets. Visa hacking, the term Visa hacking also, again, did not bring up any results. So it's worth pointing out something to each of you. Why are we seeing such irregularity in the financial world over the last 2 years, and certainly recently? Well, to sum it up, this particular initiative, as well as the sort of framework for NESARA, GESARA, global peace and free trade around the world, is exactly why we have been living through some of what we have been living through. The National Quantum Initiative was introduced in June of 2018, approved by the Congress in December of 2018, signed into law by the President of the United States in 2018. This initiative directs the President to implement a quantum initiative program to, among other things, establish goals and priorities for a 10-year plan to accelerate the development of quantum information science and technology applications. The President must establish an advisory committee to advise the President and subcommittee on the program and trends and developments in quantum information, science, and technology. The National Science Foundation shall carry out a basic research and education program on quantum information science and engineering and award grants for the establishment of multidisciplinary centers for quantum research and education. This is momentous and enormous. This public law creates the scaffolding for which we will use to roll out a new financial way of life, and it also helps to cover education, infrastructure, building knowledge, research, etc., to continue that system being informed and up to date moving forward. It also advises the Department of Energy to carry out a basic research program on quantum information science, and their Office of Science shall establish and operate a National Quantum Information Science Research Center or research centers to conduct basic research to accelerate scientific breakthroughs in quantum information science. This is the preparation for NESARA without question. This is the rollout of a new financial way of life. How do you roll out a way of life? You have to provide the physical infrastructure, the research and development to inform activities, the body of knowledge necessary for invention and innovation, origination, things of this nature. You have to secure areas, problem areas that could be usurped, made fraudulent, things of this nature. This law does it all. Now, something very interesting about this law, the actions taken in regards to its passing. Let's look at the timeline. On June the 26th, it was introduced in the lower house of Congress of the United States. On September the 13th, it was reported and amended by the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology. On the exact same day, it was passed in the lower house on a motion to suspend the rules and simply pass the bill as amended, agreed to by voice text. 2 months later, in the next congressional session, it was placed in the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation. It was discharged with unanimous consent. It was then passed in the Senate that same day with unanimous consent. Folks, you have lived through a coordinated, and you are still living through a coordinated military operation to completely reverse the course of direction for our entire Earth. This is an operation to change our systems, our societal structures and archetypes, not to remove history, but to add to it and report the correct history, and to remove the horrible systems of enslavement that we have all sort of lived with and dealt with. So understanding where we are, why we are here, and where we are going helps us to prepare for difficult times that will have to come before we get to the end of the tunnel. We know that the public narrative space has to be completely primed and ready for military tribunals. We know that physical military operations cannot cease until all mission objectives are completed. All mission objectives in this particular operation number into the millions. Not the least of which is hundreds of thousands, and at the beginning of operations, millions of hostages that needed to be rescued and preserved, and the life preserved. This is an irregular war. It is World War III. We are winning this war. It's sometimes difficult for us to see. It's difficult for us to keep our focus where it needs to be, if you will. And Q reminds us recently to, pay attention to false prophets and focus on the mission. In other words, don't sort of let your head wander into the clouds. Don't take away from the importance of what you are doing. The digital soldiers, the digital warriors out there are preserving the integrity of the mass consciousness as we go through this awakening process. You are the core by which our consciousness in the world as a whole of a species is sort of swinging and holding on. We are bracing the levee. We are bracing against, we are the levee that braces against chaos. Sorry, that was a little bit of an awkward statement there, but we are the levee that prevents the world from falling into disorder and an uncontrollable situation. This military operation around the world to change society is not possible without your participation. It is not possible without your awakening. You don't have to be, physical hands moving. You don't have to be picketing or protesting, although many of you have asked if you should. And I advise all of you to exercise your civic rights in the way that you see fit. You have civic rights that are afforded to you. You should exercise them, but you should always do so in a spirit of peace and love. We have, you don't have to be doing that, though, to be assisting in this operation. This operation is about learning the truth and learning who you are. This operation is about learning who we all are. This operation is about changing the direction of the world in the way that all of us want it to change. There is not a single breathing person in the world that does not wish to see an earth filled with love, justice, fairness, and peace. The only individuals that wish to not see that are confused, misunderstanding, or controlled assets and enemies. Those who are guilty of actual criminality will be punished. Many of them have already been punished. Many more are waiting, or we are waiting to punish them, because we're going to do so in a way that unites the earth. Q tells us 4 to 6% are lost forever. That means as we go through this process of awakening into 2023, and we go through the journey that leads us into military tribunals, military justice, and the preservation of sanity, peace, and life for mankind, will bring 85 to 90% of us at least, mostly together into the same fold. This is a great deal of what the Twitter Files operation is all about, and it is far from the last. I am here to tell you it is my belief, based on some deep research and some things that my mentor has found in his searching on the Tor browser. I'm here to tell you that Elon is far from done in the big tech space. Elon Musk will end up influencing what happens with Apple in a very big way. I'm not really sure how that is going to look at this point. It could be an acquisition. It could be a merger. Regardless, that journey between Elon, Mr. Cook, and Apple is far from over. We are preparing the world for the largest pivot in direction that it has ever seen in all of its existence. It's a very exciting time to be alive, everyone. We are moving into an improved, better way of life. We are coming into our own as a species. We're coming into our awareness of our own power. We're coming into an understanding of where we are, and we are more clearly defining every day as we go forward what we want to see in the world and where we want this world to go. That is the point of this operation, and we must actively participate mentally, even if we're not able to participate physically. Your spiritual nature is powerful. Remember to take care of it. The ability to channel love and thought form is far and away the greatest capacity that is available to you. Exercise that capacity as we go through this process. War is difficult, but no war overwhelms true love. No war can overwhelm the Creator. It's been great to be back with each of you. I look forward to speaking with you again soon. Stay safe. This is SGAnon. Thanks. Bye-bye.